Hi, today I didn't intend to, but I've been photographing brown rats. One of the side effects of feeding the birds is you do attract rats. Underneath this box there's lots of holes, and it's been very busy today, at least 8 individual rats. So I'm going to show you some of the footage of those, but I'll also show you some stills pictures that I took of some rats some years ago. They were captive rats, and it was a project that a friend of myself did for about a 2-week period, and it's quite an interesting story as to how he took the pictures. Not everybody's favourite subject, rats, but a very successful species, and they've been very entertaining as I've been watching them sitting in the hide trying to do other things. But it's been very interesting to watch the rats and the way they interact and how well they can climb, all sorts of things. So maybe it'll make an interesting video for some people. So this is all taking place at a bird feeding station from a wooden hide, and it made it very entertaining. I was enjoying watching the rats while I'm waiting for the birds to come in. How do I know there was 8 individuals? Well, at one point I could see 5 of these youngsters at the same time, so I'm assuming they're all from the same brood. The female can have up to 14 youngsters in a brood, although around 7 is more typical. And then at another stage I could see one very large, old, fat looking rat, and then at another occasion there was 2 medium-sized rats at the same time. So that brings us up to 8. Could well have been more, in fact there probably was more. I just can't tell them apart as individuals. Here's a more medium-sized rat. All of the video was taken on the Panasonic G9 using the Panasonic 100-400 zoom lens. I wasn't filming in slow motion, which I frequently do, but I was filming at 60 frames per second 4K. This camera will autofocus at 60 frames per second, and it's a difficult subject for me to manually focus on. They were moving about rather fast, and if I'd been shooting in slow motion 180 frames per second, I would have really struggled to have kept them in focus. And by shooting at 60 frames per second 4K, I can slow it down in post-production, drop it down to 30 frames so things are going at half speed, which they are in this particular shot as this rat collects some nest material. Doesn't look very old, but they can become sexually mature at just 5 weeks. So the population of rats can soar in a very, very short period of time. In the absence of human beings, the natural habitat for rats is riverbanks and wetland areas, but now they are very much associated with human beings, and most cities will have as many rats as they do people. I tried putting the GoPro Hero down just outside the burrows. I expected the rats to be very, very nervous of it, but they weren't. The youngsters especially came right up to it very quickly. I just left the camera running. The battery will last for about 2.5 hours, and it's got a very large memory card in there, so that doesn't fill up. But I was surprised when the older, more mature rats came up to the GoPro camera. This is a Hero 9. I used to have, I think it was a Hero 6, and it's just slightly easier to use. The menus are easier. The quality I think is superb for such a cheap little camera. So here's a more mature rat, and he's a bit wary of the GoPro camera, but he does come up close. I've always said that when you're sitting in hides watching wildlife, you see things you would never normally see. I've never seen brown rats climbing like this, walking about in the countryside. But sitting quietly in a hide, I was amazed how well they can climb. They must do an awful lot of damage to nesting birds in the spring. I made the mistake of leaving this peanut feeder too close to one of the upright branches. Now we'll look at a few stills pictures. These were taken in recent years in heavy snow, Always surprised they come out in the snow. They must have collected enough food by this point and stored it underground. They don't need to come out in snowy conditions, but quite often I see them come out in the snow. Now I'm going to show you some stills pictures of captive rats taken in the year 2009. At that time I was able to make a living from selling pictures of wildlife. I no longer can, as rates of pay for published pictures have collapsed, but then I could, although I was in no danger of getting rich. It was difficult to do and there was a need to diversify. I did a small amount of travel photography and had several sessions where I photographed pet animals such as gerbils, hamsters, guinea pigs, fancy mice or rats. These were not as portraits for the proud owners but as stock photography. I wanted as many different species in all sorts of settings, and I could send these off to the same picture libraries that sold my wildlife images, and it boosted my income. Amongst the fancy rats I could obtain, I found it was also possible to get tame brown rats that looked just like wild ones, and so I acquired 3 of them. Then a friend and I set about photographing them in as many different situations as we could think of. Wherever you associate rats, we wanted pictures. We used a cement mixing tray for many of the water shots. These are widely available in hardware stores and very useful shallow trays. We built this wall out of old tiles and wanted to put a crock drainage pipe in there. But where do you get a crock pipe when you want one? No good going to a building merchant's, they're all plastic today. In the end we had to settle for a plastic one and it didn't look right, but this image has sold many times. We wanted an old rusty dustbin, but where do you get one today? They're all plastic wheelie bins. We manned the phones and after a few phone calls found a friend who had got an old rusty bin, so we went to borrow it. And then behind it we scattered some rubbish. Anything we could think of to associate with brown rats. This is the cement mixing tray again, but with added duckweed. The crock pipe here we've had for years and used it for many different subjects. It's large enough for the rat to enter and photograph as it emerges. Brown rats today live in man-made environments, but would naturally appear in wetland habitats such as riverbanks, so we wanted pictures by the water. We took them out and about with us, but chose places where there were no holes they could disappear down and we could easily pick them up again. This was actually a flooded field with very shallow water, and the rats were used to people, so we could pick them up and put them down again. We wanted rats by canals, and to make sure it was obvious in the picture it was a canal, we took them to one of the locks. Next we went into a brick-built ruined barn, and because there was only half a wall and no roof, there was plenty of light coming into it for photography. Then we used a wooden barn that was rather dark, so we needed to use flash. I used to use flash a lot at one stage, but not anymore, and I was a bit rusty. But that is the greatest advantage of digital photography. Digital photography has many advantages, but the most important one is the ability to review your pictures as you take them. It makes the learning curve so fast. So into the barn we took 2 flash guns, 2 flash stands and a laptop. And as we took the pictures we would download them to the laptop and look at them. This first shot was terrible. We were very disappointed. The light was so flat and boring. We simply placed 1 flash to the left and 1 to the right and it didn't look good. So we moved the rat away from the wall onto a partition and placed 1 flash behind it and high up. The second flash was in front of the rat, lower and much weaker. The light's much improved, and it's almost as if the rat is rimlit by the rear flash. Then we started to experiment with beams of light. We used a single flash gun with a cardboard tube pushed over the front. This we squeezed into a narrow exit point for the flash, creating a narrow beam of light. When we looked at the effect on the computer, we were very excited. This looked wonderful, but without the laptop it would be much harder to judge the result than looking on the back of the camera. We wanted pictures of a rat in a tunnel, So we got some chicken wire, which we rolled up into a tunnel shape. We covered it in hessian, soaked in resin. When the resin went hard, we sprayed it with black paint and created a tunnel. The lighting is a single flash behind the rat. I'll show you just one more sequence from these rats. We wanted pictures of a rat with a corn sack, but where do you get a sack from these days? It all comes in paper sacks, not fabric sacks anymore. So we got a sheet of hessian, we folded it into the corner of a bag. We didn't make a complete bag, just the one corner. We stapled it rather than stitched it, and then when we folded it inside out, we created the corner of a bag. My friend then went onto his computer. He printed out the words cereal and corn on an A4 sheet of paper. He pasted that sheet of paper onto a bit of cardboard, and then with a sharp knife he cut out the letters, so he created a stencil. He then placed the stencil onto the hessian and sprayed it with black paint, so we created the letters on the sacking. When we looked at the pictures on the laptop, we were very disappointed. Why did we go to all that trouble and then put it on Conti board? It looked awful. So we changed the Conti board for concrete. That improved it a lot, but we still felt it should be darker. We wanted a darker background. So we got a roll of roofing felt. We put it down the wall and along the floor. That darkened up the image. And then just one final stage. We got that single flash gun again with the cardboard snoot on the front of it, creating that narrow beam of light just coming down on the rat. And that picture we were very happy with. But it took about 2 days just taking that one photograph. Thanks for watching.